Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to share about our project with you today and invite your engagement as the state's water management experts in co-creating a regional vision for people and nature. Many thanks to Holly Pisa at Mile High Flood District for inviting me to do so. My name is Dana Coelho, and I serve as director of the Metro Denver Nature Alliance. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I will be introducing you to MDNA, highlighting some accomplishments to date, and outlining the collaborative work on a regional conservation assessment that we will be facilitating over the next 18 months. The Metro Denver Nature Alliance, or MDNA, is a partner-supported and partner-supporting coalition committed to creating and implementing a regional vision for people and nature that supports equitable access to nature, as well as healthy people, communities, and natural places. We define the Metro Denver region to include the same 7 counties as comprise the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District. As an organization, MDNA facilitates collaboration and alignment among partners, champions the nature-based work of partners to raise public awareness of and support for nature, and builds partner capacity through resource sharing and training. Formally launched as a nonprofit project of the Colorado Nonprofit Development Center in 2018, this work continues to build on conversations that began back in 2014 at the Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute conference at the University of Denver. These conversations were about landscape scale conservation and the health benefits of nature in urban and urbanizing areas. We believe that a coordinated alliance can achieve more than the sum of its parts. As partners jointly consider the intersections among key regional issues, they can develop and implement more equitable, effective, and sustainable solutions. Over the past 2 years, MDNA has grown to a coalition of more than 50 nonprofit, government, academic, and private sector partners. Our leadership partners include the Cottonwood Institute, Denver Botanic Gardens, Denver Parks and Recreation, Denver Regional Council of Governments, Denver Zoo, the National Wildlife Federation, the Nature Conservancy, the Trust for Public Land, the University of Denver, Volunteers for Outdoor Colorado, and 3 private practitioners who focus on equity, health, and environmental education. Each of these partners is contributing financially and with their blood, sweat, and tears, if you will, to our shared goals. We have provided and supported training and dialogue in effective communication, strategic conservation planning, health and recreation, and equity, diversity, and inclusion in the form of community events, workshops, podcasts, web resources, and semi-annual stakeholder convenings. Our core collaborative projects, those which MDNA is itself leading, generate the capacity and focus for us to engage in, support, and bring the strength of our large and growing partner network to other partner-led projects, such as those listed here on the right. This collaboration and engagement is fueled by 3 intersecting drivers, all of which are connected to continued growth and development in the metro region: water quantity and quality, habitat loss and degradation, and the inequitable distribution of and lack of equitable access to nature, parks, and open space. Colorado's natural beauty has long inspired people to call our state home. And in the last decade, statewide growth has concentrated along the Front Range, with the Denver metro population increasing in size by about 20%. While growth is good for the economy and brings younger and more diverse people into Colorado, it also increases the strain on our valuable natural resources. Our landscapes and waterways that connect cities to nature are facing tremendous pressure, which is exacerbated by climate change. The state anticipates these trends will continue And right now, we are simply unprepared for growth at this scale if we want to sustain functioning ecosystems, water resources, and high-quality recreation opportunities for an increasingly diverse population. We know that sustaining ecosystems is a huge part of sustaining the health of individuals, especially young children, families, and communities. The social and economic benefits of nature have been well documented. The need and demand for these benefits in ecosystems has only been heightened and come into focus during the current COVID-19 pandemic. Simply put, for this region to thrive in healthy times and not so healthy times, we need to plan for and care for both people and nature. Thankfully, we are not alone in this worldview, nor are we the first to be taking on conservation in a more integrated manner. Just as Jonathan Jarvis, former head of the National Park Service, stated with regard to protected areas more broadly, we believe that understanding what we have to work with, ecologically and socially, and at a regional or landscape scale, is critically important and why we're conducting the Regional Conservation Assessment now. This assessment will arm decision makers with the foundational ecological framework to protect the natural spaces that we enjoy, that support wildlife and resilient communities, that sustain clean air and water, and that drive our local and state economies. This is our regional green infrastructure. And we must collectively decide to implement strategic and equitable decisions that guide responsible development, protect and enhance ecosystems, and ensure access for everyone to nature and its many benefits. Taking a watershed approach, the Regional Conservation Assessment will leverage existing data and planning documents to identify high-quality, connected, and climate-resilient habitat in the metro area. Combined with information related to equity and other conservation-related considerations, this Regional Conservation Assessment will provide decision makers and land managers with the now lacking information they need to collaboratively prioritize conservation and restoration activities and track progress towards shared goals using shared metrics. The assessment will be driven by technological expertise and will be conducted in a manner that reflects and engages the full diversity of partners committed to realizing a thriving region for people and nature. This work will build on and intersect with a number of related initiatives at a range of scales, from continental to local, and including work by the Nature Conservancy on landscape, connectivity, and resilience, by Colorado Parks and Wildlife on recreation and trails, by cities, counties, and special districts on open space preservation, park access, and water management, and by the organizations and partnerships that steward our regional riparian corridors, such as the South Platte River and the Highline Canal. Our work is also connected to River Sisters, an international project connecting the cities of Denver and San Luis Rio Colorado in the state of Sonora, Mexico, in efforts to celebrate and restore the Colorado River. We are connected to SPARK, the Strong, Prosperous, and Resilient Communities Challenge, which is facilitated by NRDC and engages several cities across the country. And our work is influenced by the efforts of our peers within the Network for Landscape Conservation, to whom we are connected through a shared source of funding, the network's Catalyst Fund. These connections provide us with technical capacity, access to additional funding and partner networks, cultural relevance, and valuable sources of feedback on our ideas. Similarly, we are in conversation with other metropolitan regions that have seen demonstrated success with large landscape conservation and green infrastructure projects, including Los Angeles, Chicago, Portland, Oregon, Kansas City, Seattle, and Atlanta. From them, we are learning about both technical and stakeholder engagement processes, structure, governance, and funding, and about moving from planning to implementation. So now then, back to home. The scope of the regional conservation assessment, again, is the 7 metro Denver counties: Arapahoe, Adams, Douglas, Jefferson, Boulder, Broomfield, and Denver. For the purposes of ecological analysis, we have intersected these more political boundaries with HUC 12 watersheds, which extend to the west to include the entirety of the Denver Mountain Park system. Within this geography, we are looking at spatial patterns of connectivity between and within patches of habitat to gain and document a better understanding of the presence and potential to create or restore high-quality, connected, and resilient habitat. For the last decade, we have become more and more cognizant of the fact that landscape ecology can and does contribute to the challenges of sustainability and resilience, even and especially in urban and urbanizing areas. Because this metro region is home to the majority of the state's population and situated in an ecological transition zone between and including montane and prairie systems, it is essential that it not only show up on large-scale maps and analyses of conservation priorities, but that our understanding of the metro Denver region as an ecoregion, as an ecosystem, is enhanced. This 7-county region is home to a diversity of ecosystems, some of which constitute the majority of that land cover type in Colorado, the pine oak woodlands and front range fans in particular. It is our collective responsibility to conserve these ecosystems unique to this place and the non-human animals, water resources, and other benefits and services that they provide. Further, some of the ecosystems present within our metropolitan region are unique to Colorado. Again, the pine oak woodlands and front range fans, but also the foothill grasslands and Piedmont plains and tablelands. To begin considering conservation targets, conceiving of our assessment and where it might go, we applied E.O. Wilson's half-Earth target to these ecosystems in order to get an idea of just how many acres of land would need to be protected to accomplish our share of a national or statewide half-Earth goal. For example, looking at the Alpine zone, there are just over 2.3 million acres of this ecosystem in Colorado, 43% of the 5.5 million acres in the US. A national half-Earth conservation target for this landscape type would be about 2.8 million acres, and a half-Earth conservation target in Colorado would be about 1.2 million acres. Since 2.3 million acres of alpine zone are already protected in Colorado, and the metro area only contains about 2% of the state's alpine zone acres, this ecosystem type is well protected and will likely not end up being a focus for the regional conservation assessment. In contrast, there are significant conservation gaps, acres still needing to be protected in each of the ecosystems unique to Colorado, which are highlighted red on this slide, and the 2 that are unique to the metro area. Looking at the front range fans, an ecosystem found only in the metro area, and in 6 of the 7 metro counties, a national, state, and/or regional half-Earth conservation target would be 250,108 acres in protection. Currently, we have just over 122,000 acres protected, leaving a gap of 127,941 acres to be protected. Now, how might we want to accomplish that goal? Looking at the number of acres in each of the Metro Denver counties show us that the majority of this ecosystem type occurs in Jefferson and Boulder counties, that each county has at least 15% of this ecosystem type in some form of protection already, and that region-wide, about 32% of this ecosystem type is protected, if you do a little math on these numbers in the highlighted table. In order to identify the remaining acres to be protected, if half Earth is a reasonable and agreed to goal of our partnership, this is just a thought exercise at this point, we would need dialogue across counties and ways to look for high value conservation opportunities. That is precisely what we are doing with the regional conservation assessment. Digging into the wealth of data available, designing and conducting analyses, engaging stakeholders in dialogue, and sharing outcomes and recommendations is currently conceived of as an 18-month process that we're kicking off now. We have accomplished significant pre-work over the past 2 years, thanks to the leadership of the Nature Conservancy and Biohabitats and the efforts of several graduate students, and now have the funding in place to formally kick off the assessment. We have also secured commitments from Jefferson, Denver, Adams, and Arapahoe counties to participate as technical experts and leaders in the project and are actively pursuing additional partners, including yourselves. In addition to the data exercise that I just showed you, I'd now like to share one more significant piece of pre-work that will give you a taste for the type of analyses we are developing and will be conducting. This spatial analysis was conducted earlier this year by Chris Rehack, a Biohabitats employee and now a proud holder of a Master's of Science in GIS from Johns Hopkins University. Heavily reliant on a variety of habitats and riparian areas, the mule deer we chose as a good representation of an umbrella species within the metro region, within the study area. The goal of Chris's analysis was to identify connectivity corridors, and pinch points or areas of impedance where restoration might improve connectivity and movement of this particular species. The analysis was conducted using ArcGIS Pro and CircuitScape, a connectivity analysis software package that uses algorithms from electronic circuit theory to predict patterns of movement, gene flow, and genetic differentiation among plant and animal populations in heterogeneous landscapes. As previously defined, the study area includes the 7 Metro Denver counties and covers a total of 6,148 square miles. Data inputs for this analysis included EPA level 4 ecoregions, 1 meter land cover from the Denver Regional Council of Governments, DRCOG, wildlife data from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and aerial imagery for land cover classification outside of the DRCOG pilot classification area. Chris's land cover classification process, how he used these aerial data to classify and extract land cover information, first looked at buildings and impervious surfaces, then vegetation index information to identify water, barren land, tree canopy, and herbaceous or grassy areas. This resulted in a final 1 meter resolution land cover classification for the entire study area, which was then used to conduct a core habitat analysis based on what we know about mule deer and its habitat preferences and requirements. And explored landscape resistance, land cover classes that would impede the movement of mule deer across the regional landscape. These barriers include buildings, roads, and rocky areas, water bodies, cropland, shrubland, and prairie. Using CircuitScape, Chris modeled connectivity and ease of movement for mule deer across the region. Areas in dark green in this image are core habitat, and red spots indicate the greatest resistance to movement. Applying a least cost or shortest and most efficient path from one habitat core to another yielded this visualization of habitat corridors. The pinch point analysis, a hybrid model that used both circuit theory and least cost path analysis, helped to identify critical areas of resistance within habitat corridors, whether currently used or with the potential to be used by mule deer present in the region. Finally, this barrier analysis identified restoration opportunities and could be used to guide restoration and land protection activities in hotspots shown to the north, east, and southeast of the city of Denver. Again, these snapshots are just an example of the type of data we are compiling and the tools we intend to use to complete the regional conservation assessment. These maps were not created with stakeholder input and do not represent final outputs of the project. This pilot project does, however, hold a lot of explanatory power and has given us a much better understanding of just what is possible with the data and the technical expertise that we have. So, taking a closer look at project data collection, methodology development, and analysis, we have and will continue to compile the highest resolution and highest quality data in order to map the habitats of a range of indicator species, may or may not include mule deer. These indicator species will be determined by our technical advisory team. We'll use these data to assess connectivity and resistance and look for conservation and restoration opportunities, both within and across groups of species. Leading the assessment is a core team made up of staff from the Nature Conservancy and Biohabitats, as well as MDNA, myself, and our steering committee. The Nature Conservancy is functioning as our overall project manager and will convene technical experts. They're uniquely suited to play this role, given their long-standing experience and success in conservation planning, priority setting, and stakeholder engagement in Colorado, in the US, and globally. TNC is a contributing MDNA partner, and their urban conservation lead, Chris Hawkins, sits on the MDNA steering committee. Biohabitats, also a contributing MDNA partner, will be the project's technical lead. Their team of conservation planning experts have been actively engaged in some of the projects that this assessment will be drawing from and connecting to, such as the Highline Canal Stormwater Enhancement Project, as well as regional assessments and green infrastructure analyses in Kansas City and Atlanta. Our methods, the methods that this core team is moving forward with, draw upon the open standards for the practice of conservation and TNC's conservation by design approach, both of which are evidence-based, explicitly consider linkages between people and nature, design strategies for systemic change, and integrate spatial planning with the development of new conservation strategies. This core team will be supported by a strong coalition, thoughtfully built to inform and implement the assessment. The Leadership Council will comprise decision makers from key land and water management organizations across the region who will make certain the regional conservation assessment is recognized at the highest levels, supports regional goals, and is well positioned to drive decisions. Our technical advisory team will include experts in vegetation and wildlife ecology, GIS, water resources, climate resilience, and related disciplines from conservation organizations, universities, and local government. The outputs of the regional conservation assessment will include a strategy, a shared and adopted plan and portfolio of targets, metrics, and priority lands and waters in the Denver metro region. This strategy will guide collaborative actions to establish a high-quality, connected conservation network that supports ecological function, community health, equitable access to nature, and outdoor recreation. A biodiversity atlas for decision makers. This will be a database of relevant geospatial information accessible to MDNA partners, stakeholders, and the public, and that will be used to prioritize the region's lands and waters for protection, restoration, and enhancement. This product will include a spatially explicit map that will be accessible to decision makers across the region to support their high-level decisions, as well as the data, methods, and metadata that can be used and adapted for future and more local, more project-specific analysis. Third, a diverse, engaged, and invested partner network. Leveraging the expertise and input of our partners will drive implementation of the regional conservation strategy, support its integration into a broader regional vision for people and nature, and foster continued collaboration. Upon completion of the regional conservation assessment, our vision 18 months out, if you will, our intent is to have completed a process and created a product that informs and influences decisions within and across jurisdictions, that supports equitable access to nature for all and enhances community well-being, supports wildlife in the face of a changing climate, creates an ecological knowledge base to inform future policy, planning, and funding decisions, deepens collaboration among nature-based organizations and agencies within the region, and improves the efficiency and effectiveness of planning and decision-making through the development of shared goals, priorities, and metrics. These outcomes will continue to be built upon throughout the life of the Alliance and in service of broad regional goals around air and water quality, species preservation and biodiversity, equitable access to nature, and climate resilience. The outputs of the regional conservation assessment will be combined with earlier and updated analysis that has been conducted and is being conducted with the Trust for Public Lands and the STUMAP project, the Stewardship Mapping and Assessment Project. MetroDNA's work in 2017 and 2018 with the Trust for Public Land looked at access to existing parks and open space, gaps in equitable access, and opportunities for establishing new green spaces. These analyses looked at just a portion geographically of the 7-county region, but did include stakeholder input on the data layers included, as well as the weights applied to them in looking at each question of interest to MetroDNA as the Alliance was emerging. Depicted in these images here, these questions were, where do we have and where do we need access to parks and open space? Where are the greatest opportunities to support and protect healthy natural systems? Where are the greatest opportunities to enhance trail connectivity? And where are the greatest needs and opportunities to engage vulnerable populations, including minority, low income, less educated, linguistically isolated, and mobility limited households, as well as our youngest and oldest residents? Bringing valuable social capacity information to the regional conservation assessments and informing and connecting our partner network, the Denver Environmental Stewardship Mapping and Assessment Project, or STUMAP, is designed to paint a picture of the region's environmental stewardship landscape, documenting where the many private and public sector organizations work, how they are connected, and from where they source the information and tools that enable on-the-ground stewardship action and education. These results will inform implementation of strategies recommended in the assessment and the broader regional vision for people and nature. Preliminary results from the STUMAP project include 24 mapped environmental stewardship organizations and their top priority projects. In this image, you can begin to see how our social capacity is distributed across the landscape and at what scale partners and stakeholders self-report their work. We also have early visualizations of how these organizations are connected to one another and additional groups that they named. From this, we got a early result that some of the most densely connected organizations within this Metro Denver social ecosystem are the City and County of Denver, the U.S. Forest Service, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and Metro Denver Nature Alliance. These results certainly could have something to do with who was leading the project and asking the questions. But as we get more information and continue to talk to even more partners, we're really interested in how this landscape expands and what else we learn about the partners who can and will be engaged in developing and then implementing the regional vision. Ultimately, we are working toward the presence and persistence of a strategically planned and managed network of working landscapes, natural lands, and waterways at multiple scales that conserve ecosystem function, restore ecosystem processes, and regenerate healthy, robust, and resilient communities. And we are working toward a robust and densely connected network of partners across disciplines and across sectors who are committed to this vision of a thriving region for people and nature. With that, I will conclude. I hope that this presentation has been informative and has generated some questions. We do have a few minutes left today for dialogue, and I very much invite any and all of you interested in learning more and becoming involved to reach out to me or to visit our website. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I really enjoyed being here today.